You know, when people say that marriage is a journey, they usually mean it involves shared experiences, UPS downs, and a lot of compromise. But my marriage? Let's just say it turned out to be an unexpected adventure. One that left me questioning everything I thought I knew about myself. My name is Victoria, and this is my story of temptation, realization, and the subtle boundaries that define loyalty. It all started innocently enough. I met Michael at a charity event I attended with my husband. Michael was charming, confident, and had this way of making everyone around him feel seen. He worked in finance, had an impressive background, and was by all measures someone you couldn't help but notice. Throughout the night, I found myself exchanging glances with him. It was nothing flirtatious, or at least that's what I told myself. I just found him interesting. He laughed at all my jokes, nodded at everything I said, and seemed genuinely engaged in our conversation, and honestly, it felt good to be seen like that. Sometimes we get so comfortable in marriage that we forget what it feels like to be noticed by someone new. As the night ended, I thought that was the last I'd see of him. But fate, it seems, had other plans. A few weeks later, while I was out shopping, I ran into him at a cafe. I had just ordered my coffee when I heard a familiar voice say, "Victoria." I turned around, and there he was, smiling that same charming smile that had first caught my attention. We ended up sitting together, catching up and chatting about life. Michael shared stories about his travels, his job, and his family. Our conversation was surprisingly easy, flowing naturally from one topic to another. It was like reconnecting with an old friend I never knew I had. After that, we began running into each other more often. Coincidental meetings at the park, at the grocery store, even at the gym. It almost felt like the universe was bringing us together. I told myself it was nothing more than casual friendship. But deep down, I felt a spark that I hadn't felt in years. One afternoon, Michael invited me to a small art gallery opening. He knew I loved art, and he thought I'd appreciate the local artist's work on display. I hesitated. I knew my husband was working late that evening, but going to an event alone with another man felt, well, a little wrong. I convinced myself that it was harmless. It was just a gallery, a place full of other people. And besides, I was simply indulging in my love of art. The gallery was stunning. We walked through each room, admiring the paintings, discussing the artist's techniques, and sharing our thoughts. At one point, we stood in front of this beautiful painting, a serene landscape with vibrant colors and delicate brushstrokes. He leaned in close and whispered, "This painting reminds me of you." My heart skipped a beat. The compliment was simple, yet it felt so personal, so intimate. After the gallery, he suggested we grab a quick bite to eat at a nearby restaurant. I should have said no. I should have walked away, gone home, and pretended that night was just another casual outing. But instead I agreed, and we ended up at a quiet little Italian place with dim lighting and cozy booths. It felt far too romantic for two friends sharing a meal. We talked about our lives, our dreams, our struggles. He shared things with me that felt deeply personal, and I found myself opening up in ways I hadn't with anyone else in years. As the evening wore on, I noticed he was watching me closely, as if trying to read the emotions I wasn't saying out loud. There was a tension between us, unspoken but undeniable. I didn't tell my husband about that evening. It felt like our little secret, something I wasn't ready to share. But that one evening changed everything. After that, I began thinking about Michael more often. I'd find myself looking forward to our coincidental meetings, wondering what it would be like to see him again. One day he texted me suggesting we meet up for coffee. My heart raced as I read his message. A part of me wanted to decline, to put an end to whatever was happening between us. But another part of me felt alive, exhilarated by the attention. I found myself typing a quick yes before I even realized it. The coffee date was once again casual on the surface, but there was a sense of closeness between us. A familiarity that felt both comforting and dangerous. He complimented me on little things. The way I laughed, the color of my dress, the way I listened. It wasn't that my husband didn't notice these things, but with Michael, everything felt fresh, new, and a little bit thrilling. He asked me about my dreams, things I wanted to do but hadn't. I told him I'd always wanted to travel more, see parts of the world that seem like distant dreams. He looked at me and said, "You should go for it, Victoria. Life is too short to hold back." There was something about the way he encouraged me that felt intoxicating. Over time, I began sharing things with him that I hadn't even told my husband. It was like he saw a part of me I'd forgotten existed. I knew I was walking a fine line, treading on the edges of something that could easily spiral out of control, but the thrill was undeniable. Then came the day he asked me to join him for a weekend hike. My husband was away on a business trip, and Michael knew I loved the outdoors. I should have said no, I knew it. But somehow I convinced myself that it was just a hike, just two friends enjoying nature. As we tracked through the forest, surrounded by the quiet beauty of nature, it felt like the whole world had faded away. It was just him and me, two people lost in the moment. We talked, laughed, and shared stories, the kind of connection that felt almost surreal. And then as we reached a clearing with a breathtaking view, he looked at me with a seriousness that took me off guard. "Victoria," he said softly, "I've never felt this way about anyone before." Those words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. I felt my heart racing, my mind whirling with conflicting emotions. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. The silence between us was filled with unspoken feelings, desires we both knew couldn't be acted upon. Standing there in that clearing, with Michael's words lingering in the air, I felt a mixture of exhilaration and dread. This was real now. There was no pretending that our connection was casual, or that it wasn't affecting me deeply. I finally managed to break the silence. "Michael," I whispered, "this can't happen. I'm married." He nodded, his expression filled with a mix of understanding and disappointment. "I know, Victoria. I never meant for it to get this far. But there's something about you that I just can't shake. You've brought something back into my life that I didn't realize was missing." I couldn't deny that he'd done the same for me. There was a certain loneliness in my marriage, a routine that had taken over, leaving me feeling like a shadow of the woman I once was. But with Michael, I felt seen, alive, understood in a way I hadn't been in years. Yet I knew that stepping any closer to him would risk unraveling everything. I finally gathered the strength to step back and say, "I can't keep doing this, Michael. I'm sorry." I expected him to plead with me to reconsider, but instead he surprised me with a gentle nod. "I understand, Victoria. I won't push. Just know that if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." That day left me feeling like I was standing at the edge of a cliff. I knew I had to distance myself from him, and I truly intended to. For the next several weeks, I avoided places where we might run into each other, even change my routine. But in the quiet moments, he was still there, lingering in my thoughts. One evening, I was preparing dinner when my husband came up behind me, wrapping his arms around me unexpectedly. He whispered, "I miss you, Vic." Something about those words hit me hard. Here was my husband, a man